Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end. And let's get started. Izuku Yagi's early childhood was a picture of idyllic happiness. He was a radiant, kind-hearted boy whose smile could kill the sun, running around with stars in his eyes, emulating his ultimate hero, All Might. He was deeply loved by his family, his gentle mother, Inko, his strong, inspiring father, Toshinori, and his twin sister, Izumi, his inseparable partner in adventure. He was, in every sense, an angelic child who found joy in everything. This perfect world crumbled on the day of their fourth-year quirk diagnosis. The doctor confirmed that Izumi had manifested a powerful telekinesis quirk, even stronger than their mothers. The Yagi parents erupted in celebration, their attention fully consumed by their daughter's promising future. Izuku, sitting quietly, received his diagnosis with a sinking heart, quirkless. The doctor pointed to an extra toe joint as the proof. That one measly word became the brand that defined his life. The change was immediate and brutal. That very night, as his family celebrated Izumi, he was ignored. He went to bed naive, hoping it was a temporary oversight and that tomorrow, everything would be normal again. It wasn't. Izumi and his friends, who would become his primary tormentors Kitsuki Bakugo, Katsumi, Shoto, and Zayato Todoroki suddenly saw him as an offense. His dream to be a hero was treated as a personal insult to them. For a month, the pure-hearted Izuku hid the scratches and bruises from his parents, believing they would care. The harsh reality finally set in when his family planned a trip to a water park. Izuku waited by the door in his swim trunks, buzzing with excitement, only to watch the family car drive away without him. They had forgotten him. The realization was a physical blow. His own family did not love him because he was quirkless. The following 9 years were a relentless hell. The bullying escalated from childish teasing to systematic torture. Izumi used her telekinesis to throw him into walls, hit him with objects, and humiliate him publicly. Because she inherited their father's blonde hair, no one ever guessed they were siblings. Kitsuki was the most physically aggressive, getting in his face to scream insults, burning his skin with explosions, and making him choke on ash. Katsumi used her missile quirk to pelt him from a distance, ensuring he was never safe even in a crowd. Shoto alternated between giving him severe frostbite with his ice and painful burns with his fire. Zayato scolded him with her superheated steam. They all called him Deku, a name meaning useless, to the point that his real name was forgotten. The constant, extreme stress began to bleach streaks of white into his forest green hair, a physical manifestation of his breaking spirit. The worst part was that Izuku, in his shattered self-worth, believed he deserved it. He internalized their hatred, thinking the world would be better if he weren't a quirkless loser. Yet, a tiny, stubborn part of him still clung to his dream of being like All Might. The story picks up on the last day of middle school. Izuku knows a special beating is coming but consoles himself with the thought of the long holiday ahead where he can hide and recover. He had taught himself first aid at age 7, becoming proficient at patching himself up. In class, the teacher deliberately provokes the situation by announcing, "The Yagi twins are applying to UA." This direct association of Izuku with a heroic future incites Kitsuki, who grabs him by the collar, burning his neck. "What kind of stupid are you, Deku? Do you still really think you can be a hero? UA won't even accept a quirkless loser like you." Izuku, stuttering but defiant, argues, "They got rid of that rule, Kachin. I could be the first quirkless hero." After class, the true cruelty unfolds. Izumi telekinetically rips his hero analysis journal, a book containing years of meticulous, hopeful work, from his bag. With a pleading look, Izuku whispers, "Mishin." For a split second, something unrecognizable flashes in her eyes. But it's too late. Shoto freezes the book solid, and Katsumi throws it to the ground, shattering it into a million pieces. As Izuku drops to his knees, weeping over the fragments of his dream, Zayato blasts him with hot steam. Kitsuki looms over him, smoke rising from his hand on Izuku's shoulder, and delivers his ultimatum. If YA know what's good for YA Deku, you won't even attempt the UA entrance exam. As Izuku stumbles toward the door, broken, Izumi delivers the final, unforgivable blow. Hey Deku, if you really want a quirk that badly, I may have an idea for you. Take a swan dive from the roof and pray for a quirk in your next life. For the first time in years, a spark of something other than sadness ignites in Izuku a flicker of righteous anger. He meets her eyes and says, his voice thick with tears but clear in its meaning, "If you hate me that much, then you can kill me yourself." No one would care. His words hang in the air, and the group is stunned into silence. The gravity of what they have done, what Izumi has just said, crashes down on them. They realize their plan to protect him by breaking his spirit has spiraled into monstrous cruelty. They vow to stop and beg for his forgiveness, knowing they likely don't deserve it. Devastated, Izuku wanders the streets, contemplating the worthlessness of his existence. Under a bridge, he is attacked by the sludge villain. In a moment of profound empathy, Izuku sees not a monster, but a fellow outcast. He tries to reason with the villain, offering to help him because he understands what it's like to be cast aside by society. Because I want to be a hero. I get ostracized and isolated too. I want to help the people who never got a chance to have a life. Even people like you. I know that you didn't have a choice. So I want to at least try and help you. The villain is stunned, moved by being treated as a human for the first time. But their moment is shattered by All Might's dramatic arrival. The hero ignores Izuku's desperate cry of All Might, "Wait," and obliterates the villain with a single punch. After capturing the villain, All Might dismissively gives a starstruck Izuku his autograph. Gathering every last ounce of his courage, Izuku asks the question that is his lifeline. Can someone without a quirk become a hero? All Might's answer is a cold, final verdict that extinguishes Izuku's world. No, All Might said flatly. It would be stupid for someone without a quirk to try and become a hero. It's good to have dreams, kid, but you have to be realistic. A doctor or an officer is a fine job if you want to help others. The symbol of peace then leaves Izuku alone on the pavement, his dream in ashes. Locked out of his own home, Izuku prepares to climb through his window when he overhears his father and sister talking. He watches as his skeletal father transforms in a puff of smoke into the muscular form of All Might. The betrayal is visceral. His father, his hero, is the man who just destroyed him. He listens as Toshinori reveals the secret of One for All to an awestruck Izumi and offers it to her. When Izumi, showing a shred of decency, asks, "Why not Izuku, his quirkless?" All Might's answer is the final, soul-crushing blow. Because he doesn't have the heart like a true hero. You do. Hearing his own father declare that his abusive sister possesses the heart of a true hero, while he, who has endured hell and still wants to save people, does not, completely shatters Izuku's psyche. He stumbles away from the house in a catatonic state, his mind unable to process the layers of betrayal. He finally collapses in a dark, deserted alleyway. Curling into a ball against the cold wall, the dam finally breaks. All the pain, the loneliness, the beatings, the neglect, and the world-shattering betrayals from his sister, his mother, and his father, his hero, come pouring out in racking sobs and screams. His entire existence condenses into two broken, whispered words, repeated to an uncaring universe. Why me? Izuku sat in the alleyway, tears still rolling down his face. He had started to think more on what his father had said. He had a possible quirk. One for All isn't his quirk, and that quirk is what made him All Might. So what was his quirk before One for All? Izuku had never thought of this much before, but what was his father's quirk? He knew his mother's quirk has a telekinesis quirk, but he was tricked into believing it was a weak one. It clearly wasn't, as it was the quirk Green Tornado had. The number 8 pro hero. But what was his father's quirk? Izuku thinks hard and has come to the conclusion that he's never said his quirk. But if he was given One for All, he'd still have his original quirk, wouldn't he? Unless he was. Izuku stopped. If his father was quirkless, it would only make sense of how he became quirkless. It was still an incredibly rare chance for him to become quirkless, but it was a lot higher than if he did have a quirk. Izuku couldn't believe it. His father, who he is probably quirkless, neglected his quirkless son, something that he once experienced. Izuku started to cry again. "Hey, a crybaby is out late at night," a voice said. Izuku sniffled and looked up. Two men approached him. The man who spoke first seemed to have sickly pale skin. But on closer inspection, Izuku identified that his skin was a light gray. He had dark hair and eyes that were impossible to see the color of them in the dark. He wasn't tall but was well built. The second guy was taller than the other man. He was lanky and tall. He had black hair that seemed to have random yellow highlights in his hair. Izuku gulped as tried backing away, only to remember that he was already backed against a wall. Izuku tried to talk, but the gray-skinned male dashed forward. Izuku yelled, but it was quickly silenced by the man's hand. Izuku was panicking. These men were going to hurt him. "It's your own fault, kid. A string being like you shouldn't be out this late at night," the lanky male said. "Just be quiet and do your job as a lookout," the other man barked. The lanky man rolled his eyes before turning around. Izuku was panicking. He tried to push the man off of him, but it was no use. He was clearly a lot stronger than Izuku. Izuku then felt something sharp start poking his face. Izuku looked down and saw the man's fingernails were causing his face to bleed. They were silver, but also looked shiny, like it was something metallic. "What the? Do you not have anything? Not even a phone?" the man stated angrily. Izuku looked up at him pleadingly, hoping to at least be able to say something, but all he got was a punch to the stomach. Izuku choked at the force. It was a lot harder than what any of his bullies had given him before. Even stronger than Toyoshi with a rock mutation quirk and Shoto when he covers his fist in ice. It was like this man's fist was harder than the regular person. But it didn't make sense. His quirk gives him metal fingernails. The man punched him again, and it felt a lot worse the first time. He had probably bruised him from the first punch. The man smirked as he saw Izuku's expression, deciding to readjust his grip. He covered Izuku's face entirely with his hand before lifting him up with that one arm. Izuku then felt his head starting to break. This guy was strong. He obviously had more than a quirk that made his nails metal. But what could he do? What could a useless Deku like him do? Grab him. Something inside Izuku's was telling him to grab the man. An instinct was more correct. Izuku in a blind panic and fear. Izuku reached his hand forward. He grabbed the man's face with his hand. Izuku didn't know why he was doing it, but he wasn't expecting any results from it. Izuku wasn't aware of anything. The only thing he could feel was pain. But the next thing he knew, Izuku was dropped. Izuku started coughing and held his face with his hand. He wasn't sure on what just happened, but he looked up to the man who had just held him. He was on the ground, groaning, seeming like he was in pain. What happened? Izuku thought. The man shook his head, then looked up at him angrily. What was that? The man yelled angrily. Izuku was scared, but he knew he couldn't just let the man attack him again. Quickly, Izuku lunged forward and slammed his fist down onto the man's face. The man yelled and quickly slammed into the back of his head into the pavement, knocking him out. Izuku was shocked. He didn't think he had enough strength to do that. "Oh no," another voice said. Izuku looked up to see the other man running up to him. Izuku had completely forgotten he was there. Izuku's eyes widened as electricity started to emit around his body. Izuku jumped back as the man quickly approached him. Izuku looked around the alleyway trying to look for something. It seemed as though the man couldn't fire his electricity outwards, otherwise he would have already done it. His attacker charged at Izuku head-on, meaning he had to get close. Izuku saw a garbage can and quickly picked it up. He seemed to pick it up easier than he had expected, but that could be the adrenaline helping him out with it. He threw it at the rushing villain and it slammed him on the head. Izuku didn't waste his opportunity and attacked the man. Running at him, Izuku got down low and swept the man's leg with his own like he's seen several pro heroes do. The man yelped and quickly fell down. The man must have been heavily off balance as the man barely put up any resistance as he dropped to the ground. But the man wasn't out. He looked up at Izuku angrily and reached out his hand. Izuku yelled as Izuku felt like he was being tasked. Izuku could feel the stinging sensation from his stomach flow through his entire body, particularly his bones as he crumpled. He felt the similar instinct to what he felt before. In his delirious haze of being shocked, Izuku reached for the villain and gripped him tight. Suddenly, the pain of being electrocuted stopped. Izuku cracked his eyes open to the sound of the man yelling. Izuku looked down and looked at the man's face. His eyes had rolled to the back of his head and he was twitching violently. Izuku quickly stood back up and jumped away in fright. What had happened? What did he just do? The villain stopped twitching shortly after Izuku removed his hand. His eyelids closed shut and he became limp. Izuku stayed at the man in shock. He quivered against the wall as his eyes were glued to the figure laying there on the ground. Izuku stared at him intently, trying to find any sort of movement or breathing or any sense of life. Had he killed him? Izuku dropped down to sit, his legs giving out. Izuku couldn't stop shaking as his eyes refused to leave the man's body. Izuku slowly started to breathe quicker. His breath was becoming irregular and too quick to determine if he had just inhaled or exhaled. What had he done? Izuku's hands snaked their way to his hair and started to pull it. He kept shaking his head, staring down at the body. Then a flash of yellow light caught Izuku's attention. Finally pulling his eyes away from the possible dead man, Izuku looked up his arms. They were crackling electricity. Izuku stopped. He slowly removed his hand from his hair and looked at them. Izuku stayed at the electricity. It was that man's quirk. How did he get it? He was quirkless and he definitely would know if he had a copy quirk. But no copy quirk ever actually hurt the target who had their quirk copied. If anything, it would hurt the user having an unnatural ability now in their body, even if it was for a short amount of time. Izuku then caught a quick shine on the tips of his fingers. He turned his fingers down and looked at what caught his eyes. Izuku saw that his fingertips were no longer a light pink but a shiny silver. A metallic silver. Izuku then looked over to the other guy who also laid limp on the ground. Izuku could see his fingertips and saw that they were regular. Izuku's eyes widened. He had two quirks at once. Even that was unheard of for a copy quirk. Not having two stored quirks, two active quirks at once. Izuku gulped and tried to calm himself down. He had to make sure that they were alive. He wouldn't know what to do if they were dead. Izuku didn't want to be a murderer. He didn't even know what just happened. He just panicked. Izuku took deep breaths, remembering those videos to help with panic attacks. They did really help, because he had to psych himself up every morning to leave his room. During the breathing, Izuku had closed his eyes. Once he opened his eyes, the electricity was gone. Izuku sighed as he shakily looked at his arms. He then frowned once he got back to his fingernails. They were still metal. Shaking it off, Izuku then crawled over to the guy with yellow highlights in his hair. Izuku then starts to wonder if those are natural or dyed. Quirks do tend to change the user's appearance even if the quirk itself isn't a mutant type. Rather an emitter or transformation. Like the guy from before, his quirk made his skin gray despite him most likely having a no bad Izuku. Stop geeking about quirks in a time like this. Find out if these two are alive. Izuku breathed out a shaky breath and slowly moved his arm over to the man who had an electric quirk. Izuku gasped out a sigh of relief. He still had a pulse. Izuku became content at the revelation that he hadn't killed a man. Izuku then crawled over to the man with a metal nail quirk. Izuku chuckled softly that he was alive. But now, what was he going to do? Izuku should really call the police to get these two to jail. But then he'd have to tell the operator on the other line who he was. Not that him saying his name was a problem, but that his parents would be contacted. They were probably on bed or celebrating with Izumi that she was receiving that stupid quirk from Dad. If they were interrupted with whatever they were doing to come and get him, they would be extremely annoyed and furious. Although his parents had never hurt him physically, it may be because they never knew he was there in the first place. If they suddenly remember he existed, he wouldn't be surprised if he got a good slap to the face. Oh, and Izumi would definitely beat him. She had never done it at home, but it's because she probably doesn't want to break anything or was too distracted by her parents to notice Izuku as well. Izuku sighed and lowered his head. He finally had a quirk that could at least copy others. He would no longer be a Quirkless Deku and might be able to have a normal life and go to UA with the rest of them. But did he really want that? Even after everything they put him through? Would that even happen? Izuku sighed and stood up. He looked straight forward from where he was and saw a window. The window was dark and Izuku couldn't see anything through it. The sky may not have been much brighter, but Izuku could still see. The window still had his reflection there. Izuku walked forward to it, wincing at the view. He had several cuts and bruises all over his face and even a burn on the side of his neck from Kotsumi. His hair was long and untamed. He had only had a haircut twice in the past 9 years, and that was Izuku grabbing the kitchen scissors and cutting his own hair because his hair was too long and kept getting in his eyes and mouth. He had tried to straighten it out, but his hair refused to cooperate. He wished he got his father's genes for this part, as his mother's curly hair kept getting tangled and grew out like an afro. Izuku had accepted a long time ago that his hair would be messy and untamed forever, unless he was going to cut it off completely. But if Izuku was completely honest, he kind of liked it. Izuku raised his hand and brushed the gray hairs near his ears he had been growing. He first started to notice them a year ago, but has slowly been getting more. Izuku didn't want to be called an old man before he graduated high school. Izuku sighed disappointedly as he looked at himself. Other than the wild nature of his hair, he didn't really like what he saw. His beady green eyes and tiny freckles. His small and frail stature that was heavily malnourished. The dark bags underneath his eyes and the bright green hair that reminded him of his mother. He didn't like it. Izuku attempted a smile. He can't remember the last time he smiled. He used to give fake smiles all the time, but he stopped bothering after he came to terms that no one cared about if he was okay or not. Even if he wanted to ruin his old friends and sisters' chances to get into UA, not like anyone would believe him. He gave a shaky smile that wasn't even a smile. His mouth was more like a round rectangle than the edges of his lips going up and his eyes slightly narrowing. His eyes just squinted as he scanned his face. God, he really didn't like how he looked. He hated the places that obviously looked like his mother, as he didn't really have much physical features from his father other than being skinny. But then something caught Izuku's eye. His teeth seemed dark. Izuku inched closer to the window. He hooked his lip with his index finger and lifted it up to get a better look. Izuku tilted his head up and moved his head around. Izuku was trying to notice what was wrong with them, because they were certainly not white or yellow. Could they be rotting? No, they would hurt if they were rotting. Izuku used his other hand and pointed out his index finger. He then started tapping on his teeth. They certainly weren't normal. They were hard, but not like regular teeth. They were also strangely cold despite his mouth being warm. Izuku kept tapping them, but then yelped in pain. He had hit his teeth with his metal fingernail. There was a clang sound like metal had hit each other. Izuku's eyes widened in realization. He opened his mouth again and looked at his teeth. They were metal. Wait, how was that man's teeth and nails both metal? That doesn't make sense. Although quirks are unpredictable, they still have some sense and logic with them that works with real-world examples. Like the user manipulates the temperature of the water molecules in the air and expands them to create ice. Or how electric quirks are still attracted to metal and can charge batteries and other things. It doesn't make sense if the user has specifically their nails and teeth metal, unless they weren't the only thing metal. Despite their appearance, both teeth and nails are in fact bones. So it would make sense if the user had metal bones. The man did have a hard punch. Izuku couldn't really test that out if he had metal bones, but it would make. Now that the Izuku's adrenaline had run out, his body did feel oddly heavy. It took a considerable amount of effort to just raise his arm. It could just be the exhaustion or the pain Izuku was feeling, but how the man was punching him before. It felt like there was something else in his hand. If his bones were metal, that would make sense. Izuku huffed and looked at his nails and tried to concentrate in turning his quirk off to test his theory. The only problem was that it wasn't turning off. Izuku was slowly starting to get frustrated and panic. Why wasn't the quirk turning off? The other man's electric quirk did, so why wasn't his? There are a few emitter quirks that actually can't be turned off, but there are no examples as such for a transformation quirk. The only other way a quirk can't be turned off is if it was a mutant quirk. But Izuku wouldn't be able to copy it then. There are no cases of a copy quirk that can copy a mutant quirk. Not that they are very common. They are one of the rarest types of quirks. Even Eraserhead's Erasure quirk didn't affect mutant quirks. So why did his? It would be strange if his quirk could copy mutant quirks while others couldn't, especially since his mother had a telekinesis quirk and his father, well, might be quirkless. But what if he didn't copy the person's quirk? Izuku remembers seeing the man with metal nails no longer had them. If his quirk was a mutant quirk, then he should still have them if Izuku copied his quirk. But what if he hadn't copied the thug's quirk? What if he had taken it? Izuku had scanned through quirks that could possibly transfer a quirk, but those are only theories. Implausible theories. How? Although theoretically possible by quirk law, it seems outrageous that a quirk could possibly be given or taken from someone else. But if Izuku had truly stolen the man's quirk, he surely could give it back. So with shaky hands and a weird sense of curiosity and determination, Izuku slowly stepped over to the man. He put his hand on the head and tried to channel his quirk. Not like he knew how, especially since he has never had a quirk to use before. Well, until now, but it was more of a panic response. Izuku closed his eyes and tried to focus. He felt two things. One seemed to be heavy and earthy and yet natural, while the other felt sharp, energetic, and stung. The earthy one seemed to have a connection to the man Izuku was touching, so Izuku channeled it. Izuku then felt that earthy and heavy feeling leave his body. Opening his eyes, Izuku grabbed the man's hand and was shocked to see that his nails were metal once more while his were regular again. Izuku's eyes brightened at the prospect that he did make people quirkless without the ability to return their power. Izuku turned around and went to give the other man his quirk back, but stopped. These people tried to hurt him. They were villains. It's not like they were forced into this type of life. Their quirks were definitely not seen by weak or villainous by society's standards. The man with the gray skin also seemed to take joy in hurting him even when discovering he didn't have anything of value. Did these men really deserve their quirk? Izuku had been quirkless all his life. Well, supposedly quirkless. He had been repressed and hurt by virtually everyone. There had only been 3 people in Izuku's life that hadn't treated him like trash or fragile bunny that couldn't do anything. That was the old woman at the end of the street who is also quirkless herself, but she was born in a time where that was a lot more common, when quirklessness was actually 20%. They haven't bothered to update those statistics in over 3 decades. The second person was a girl with a quirk that can emit a very deadly gas from her breath. There were white highlights in it that made it so the front of the gas had an image of a skull on it. Definitely deemed as a villainous quirk. The girl was from Kyoto and was only here in Musafatsu for a vacation. The girl had seen Izuku crying and went over to help him. He had told the woman not to bother because he was quirkless and a waste of her time, but she had told him that he wasn't. She had told him about her shitty life, and because of her villainous quirk, she got stuck as a construction worker instead of the veterinarian that she was working for. Unfortunately, Izuku hasn't seen her since, as she was only in Musafatsu for a vacation. The last one was Shoto's and Zayato's eldest sibling, Tuya. He didn't have a weak quirk or villainous quirk. In fact, he actually had quite a powerful quirk, even stronger than Endeavor's, which is their father. However, he had the issue of not being immune to his own quirk. But apparently his father didn't get that and kept training him in hopes that his body would get used to his quirk. Izuku didn't know the full story, but he knew it was bad as Tuya committed suicide. He knows Uncle Enji was devastated about his death and blamed himself on it. Izuku couldn't really blame him. He was the cause of his death. He knows this was especially because Enji started insulting Tuya that Shoto and Zayato didn't have his problem with their quirk and was constantly called a failure. Izuku really misses him. When Shoto and Zayato along with the Bakugos and Izumi started hurting him, Tuya had came to his defense. He was able to stop them for a while when they first started. But he committed suicide 6 months later, just a few days after he turned 15. Izuku had bought him a birthday gift and he actually cried. Apparently, he was the only one to even remember his birthday at all. Izuku felt sorry for him and wished he could have saved him, which is why he stopped visiting Uncle Enji and Aunt Ray, who were nice to him entirely. If they treated Tuya like dirt, someone with a powerful quirk, how would they treat someone without a quirk at all? These 2 men probably had some shitty job or were bullies that never grew out of it. Troublemakers who have gotten into crime and now can't get out. Whatever their reasons were, definitely weren't justified. So Izuku bent back down and put his hand back on the man's face. He felt the familiar, natural, and earthy feeling and sucked it back into his body. He then felt heavier, which had only confirmed to Izuku that he had gotten the quirk back. Izuku then looked at the 2 thugs. What to do now? He's already came up with a reason why he can't call the police. But he obviously can't just let them go. With quirks or not, they'd still likely terrorize other people or come after him. Izuku also didn't know if his quirk was permanent or not, but he had a strange feeling that it was. Izuku looked around the alley and saw some rope. It obviously looked worn and had been used a lot, likely why it was thrown out, but it was surely still strong enough to tie these two men up. He walked over and grabbed it before going to the two men again. He pulled them together and wrapped the rope around them. He then went to his bag and grabbed one of his books and a pen. Izuku ripped out the page before writing a note on it. He then stuck the note on the side of the man's face before standing up. Izuku then turned around and left the alley, only to remember that he didn't actually know where he was. Cautiously, Izuku looked out of the alley to find the street mostly barren. Izuku then saw a service station on the other side of the road. Izuku sighed as he realized where he was. In his start of delirium, he must have subconsciously gone to his safe place. Izuku walked and headed in the direction to the place he more calls home than where he properly lives. Dragoba Beach was once a beautiful tourist attraction about a decade ago, but because of the selfishness and pure negligence of the tourists and locals, the beach has become a dump. Now the only reason people will actively go to Dragoba to dump trash that are too big to fit in their bins or if they have run out of room. But about 2 years ago, Izuku ran in the beach in hopes of getting away from his tormentors. He found a caravan that was mostly intact. Curiously, Izuku had opened the door and found the caravan was still in pretty good condition, despite it obviously being old. Izuku had actually cleaned that caravan up a bit to make it feel better and more homey than his room, and had bought a sleeping bag with the little amount of money he owned to sleep there when he wanted to relax. It was his safe place, a place where none of his bullies would ever bother to come in just to beat him up. As Izuku was walking there, though, his mind wandered back to his quirk. He could steal quirks and give them to others. Where's he heard that quirk before? Did he have all for one? How did he have all for one? Despite how much he hated his father, Izuku did know for a fact that Toshinori was his biological dad. So him being quirkless would make sense if his father was quirkless. But Izuku was born after Toshinori was given one for all, which would now be incorporated into his father's DNA, as that is how quirks worked. Copy and obvious all for one would be a slight exception to that rule, but it should still work the same. Since the original user of one for all was the brother to all for one, it would make sense how he got this quirk. Izuku grunted and shook his head. He was tired and has been a long, bad day. He can think about it tomorrow. Izuku walked into the beach and walked over the mounds of trash. He walked to the caravan and opened the door. Izuku took in a breath of air as he slid down against the door. He looked down at his hands, looking at the metal nails that he now had. He activated his electricity and allowed it to run around his body. Izuku smiled, a genuine smile. It was a nice feeling, finally not being quirkless. Izuku sighed and stood up. He walked over to the sleeping bag that was resting on the small mattress. Izuku grabbed it and gave a content hum. Izuku was really glad that it was the holiday so he didn't have to face them for a while. Izuku then frowned. How would they react if they found that he had all for one? The same quirk of his father's enemy. His parents would probably want to join him in beating him as well. Did Izuku want to go home? So Izumi, what do you say? Dad asked with a smile. Izumi stared at her father in shock. Her dad was All Might and her mother was Green Tornado. She was so shocked and so happy. The fact that both of her parents were top 10 heroes did surprisingly explain a lot. But that wasn't what her mind should be thinking about. She was being offered her father's quirk. That quirk is what has made him the symbol of peace and the undisputed #1 hero. It is a dangerous secret that would be problematic if the general public found out that his quirk could be passed to others. People from all over the world would try and get their hands on it because of how powerful his quirk was, which is what makes the holder of one for all so specific. They had to be driven to be a hero and only use the quirk for good purposes. But Izumi knows that she doesn't fit the bill. She was a bully, and that's putting it lightly. She's been in butt to several kids in her school, but none of them were nearly as bad as Izuku. Herself and her friends had started the whole bullying to get him to stop trying to be a hero. He had the heart and drive, but he didn't have a quirk. It would give him the disadvantage in all fights no matter how smart he was. It was just a risky. But beating him down day after day, hurting him with their quirks, and change his name that probably everyone outside of our class didn't actually know his real name. is just called Deku. Izumi isn't stupid, but what she does know is that she is selfish. She loves the attention that her parents give her, all the love and time they have together. She wouldn't want it any other way. Actually, that's a lie. She would like Izuku to be part of it as well. He knows that her mother and father don't speak with Izuku and that he doesn't come down and eat with them at dinner. Also thinking about it recently, has he ever gone on a family vacation trip with them? Izumi doesn't remember the last time they actually spent time together that wasn't her hitting him. Because perhaps there wasn't a time where Izuku had been part of the family. Not after his diagnosis as quirkless. Izumi wasn't worthy of one for all. She knew that. It was for people with golden souls who would risk their lives for others no matter who they were. A complete stranger, a general jerk, or someone weaker than them. They were the person who was a true hero. Izumi didn't deserve one for all. But Izuku did. I'm sorry, Dad, but I don't think I would be the appropriate holder for one for all, Izumi said, lowering her head. Why would you not be suited to hold one for all? I wouldn't be able to give you my quirk instantly, which is why we would train, Dad said. Izumi shook her head, looking back up at him. No, I mean there is somebody much more suited for it than me, Izumi admitted. If not you, then who? Dad asked, confused. Izumi smiled brightly and clapped her hands together. Izuku, she yelled happily. He always is happy and really optimistic to everyone, no matter how mean or dirty they are to him. If someone is getting bullied at our school, he'll get in the way to protect them without actually fighting them as it's wrong. He never has asked for anything in return, and if he is ever offered anything, he declines anyway, Izumi explained. Dad seemed to understand and smiled. I see. Then he would be a good fit to inherit my quirk. We would have to train hard to help fix that skinny body he has. But when he gets home, let's tell him the good news, Dad said. Izumi brightened and looked giddy. Now her brother can become heroes with the rest of her friends together like they had planned when they were younger. It still didn't get rid of the guilt that Izumi feels, and it will definitely take a while until she is forgiven. Izumi knows that, and it's okay. But she'll make it up to her brother, and this is the start. Izumi went to the lounge room and started watching TV until Izuku got home. An hour passed, and Izuku had yet to come home. She was starting to get worried. Why hadn't he come home yet? Despite how little she actually knew about her brother, she did know he didn't have any friends, which only aided in her feeling worse. Mum walked through the door. She saw Izumi looking worried. Immediately, she went over to comfort her daughter. Izumi, dear, what's wrong? Mum asked. Izumi huffed and leaned down, putting her head in her hands. Izuku isn't home yet. I'm worried that something happened to him, Izumi said. Mum frowned. She reached over and patted her back. He'll be fine, dear. He always has been. Her mother tried to comfort. Izumi scowled at that thought. Izuku has always lied about being fine, although he has never been fine. Always putting on a fake smile and hiding his scars. Scars that she gave him. He probably has never felt loved in years as her parents have been so focused on her. Izumi stood up and walked over to a counter with a bunch of photographs on it. Izumi looked at it sadly. There were several photos of her and her parents. There was a picture of them at an amusement park. One of them when they went on a trip to America where she met a girl called Melissa Shield. She was so smart and tech-savvy. She wanted to work as a support hero when she became older. But the best part was that she was also quirkless. She was loved by her father and others around her. No one cared that she was quirkless. Unlike Izuku, who gets name called daily and is constantly abused. Abused by her. She was such a shitty sister. Izuku wasn't in a single picture. He was never around, and her parents never paid attention to him. Izumi wonders just how he feels right now. Mum, why isn't Izuku in any of these photos? She asked. She knew why. They were neglecting him. So she had to do something. If she was going to redeem herself, she had to start by showing her parents how bad they are. Her mother looked confused. She walked over at the counter to look at the photos. She was scanning them, trying to find one with Izuku, only to slowly realize he wasn't in any of them. Becoming panicked, she then grabbed a book. Izumi was only able to see the cover of it briefly, but was able to determine it was their photo album. She started flipping through the book, desperately trying to find at least one picture of him. Izumi sighed and looked away. She knew she wouldn't find one. Her mother still flipped through the book before finally stopping on a page. She looked at it and started to cry. Izumi leaned over to see what she was looking at and started to cry as well. It was her and Izuku's 4th birthday. His last birthday party. He never had one after that. We've been neglecting him, her mother sobbed, crouching down and crying louder. Her father then came back into the room. Her saw her wife sobbing and Izumi crying and immediately ran up to him. What happened? Are you two okay? He asked frantically. Izumi's mum shook her head no. She jumped over to him and showed him the photo album. He isn't here. We haven't done anything with Izuku since his diagnostic. Her mother cried with tears shooting down her face. Dad went pale. He had been neglecting his own son because of his quirklessness, something that he was once himself. He knew it wasn't a nice experience and his own parents weren't exactly happy about it either. He promised himself to be a better father. How did he become so much worse? Where is he? Has he come home yet? Izumi's father asked. Izumi shook his head. No, I'm worried something happened to him, Izumi said. Her father went pale. He had seen Izuku earlier in the day and saved him from the sludge villain. But he had also crushed his dreams of being a hero. He had to find him and bring him home. To make everything right. He ran to the door and opened it before quickly bulking up. I'll be back. I'll find Izuku, her father yelled before leaping off. Izumi's mother remained crying as she went to the bathroom. Izumi looked at the door worried and walked over to it. She looked out to the sky with a frown and small tears. Please be okay, Izuku. I never wanted this. I'm so sorry, she pleaded. Hours had passed. The sunset had turned to night. Izumi was worried. She felt guilty and angry at herself. Her dad couldn't find a brother. It had been 2 hours since he left and he is yet to come back. Did Izuku take Izumi's advice? She had told him to kill himself today. Don't tell her that he actually did it. Izumi shook those thoughts out of her head. She had to think positive. Besides, there is no way Izuku would do that. He was too damn stubborn and determined to give up. He had held strong for years. Surely he wouldn't have let today get to him. Right? Toshinori huffed defeatedly as he walked home. He had gone past his limits of 3 hours to try and find Izuku. But he had found nothing. It's like he just disappeared. Toshinori sighed as he weighed his options on what to do. He should ring him up as a missing child's case. But this would cause problems with people close to him like Naomisa, Torino, the Todorikis, and Bakugos. But he most certainly can't announce that he, All Might, now has a missing child that he neglected. Not only would it ruin his reputation as a symbol of peace, but the Hero Commission would never allow it anyway. Toshinori didn't know what to do. No matter which option he chose, it would end up badly. With himself, his friends, and his family. No matter which way you slice it, it's a bad outcome. But he deserves it, doesn't he? He neglected his own son who had the exact same problem as he did for 9 years. He was supposed to be the damn #1 hero. How could he call himself a hero if he couldn't even be one to his own damn son? Lowering his head in defeat, he reached into his pocket and grabbed his phone. There was only one person he could call that would make the right decision for him. Dialing the number, he put the phone to his ear to wait for his friend to speak. Hello, Toshi. What's up? His friend asked with a happy tone. Guilt flooded Toshinori as his hand shook. He was about to tell his friend what was wrong. He's not sure if they'll be friends after this. Naomisa, listen. I need help. Naomisa stood in the Yagi household. Toshinori, Izumi, and Inko all sat on a couch with Tsukochi sitting in a chair opposite to them with a look of shock and disgust. They had expected this. He has every right to be upset with them. Neglecting Izuku for 9 years because he was quirkless, especially since Toshinori himself was quirkless. It's hard to swallow. Naomisa was stunned, silenced. He was hoping, praying that this was all just some sick joke. But his quirk told no lies. The man that he had once thought of as a friend had neglected his own son. To make it wise, it was something as hypocritical as him being quirkless. Naomisa remembers the day when they were birthed. He came to visit his friend for support, and he had never seen him so happy. Toshinori had made a vow that no matter what, he would love his children and be a better father than what his parents had been to him. What a load of trash that ended up being. Naomisa had forgotten that Toshinori had a son. That's how bad his neglection got. He could only think of one thing to say. Nana would hit you so hard right now, Naomasa stated. Toshinori stiffened at his words but nodded his head. Yeah, she would. Naomasa sighed and held his head. Getting mad at him now wouldn't help the situation. It's obvious he's beating himself up enough. But right now he has to make sure that this is just a missing child case, not a runaway. Seeing as how Inko and Toshinori haven't as so much looked at their son in the past 9 years, there won't be any help. So Naomasa turned his eyes to Izumi. Naomasa sent the girl a soft glare. Immediately she tensed and looked away. She knew something. Izumi, Naomasa stated, getting her to look at him again. Her parents gave her a worried glance. Izumi gulped as he narrowed her eyes at her. Izumi, seeing as you probably know him the best, I'm going to ask you a few questions, Naomasa said seriously. Izumi shakily nodded her head. Naomasa took note of the tremor in her fingers, the terrified expression she wore, and how she couldn't meet his eyes. She knew something or did something bad. Looking at the situation, probably both. Her mother reached over and held her hands. She gave her a sympathetic smile before turning back to the detective. What was your brother like? He asked. Izumi looked away, but smiled sadly. He was the kindest person you'd meet. He has a love for both heroes and quirks. He even carries notebooks on them and analyzes them, both strengths and weaknesses. He had a beautiful and kind heart who would put himself in front of others without question if they were getting hurt at school. He's shy and not very social but caring nonetheless. She smiled. Naomasa raised an eyebrow at her. His quirk didn't activate, so Izumi was telling the truth, which made Naomasa angrier that they were neglecting a kind-hearted kid like that. But even though she had said all of those things, her actions before didn't represent the same emotion she was showing now. Izumi, would you say that you are friends with your brother? Naomasa asked, narrowing his eyes at her. The girl flinched and her nervous behavior came back again. Yes, she responded. Naomasa slumped his shoulders and looked unimpressed at the girl. She glowed red, telling Naomasa that she had lied. Izumi, I have a lie detector quirk and I can tell that you lied. Please tell me your exact relationship with your brother, Naomasa said sternly, glaring at the girl. Toshinori and Inko gasped before turning to Izumi. She was shaking and now she looked on the verge of tears. Izumi looks down full of shame. I bully him, she stutters, a single tear dropping onto the floor. Naomasa scoffs quietly that they don't hear it and roll his eyes. Can you explain why, please? He asks, looking up at her. She coughs out a sob, her eyes turning red and puffy, and she brings her legs up to the couch. He wants to be a hero. He always has been, and when he was diagnosed quirkless, that determination didn't change. I was scared that he would die. Hero work is dangerous, even with a quirk. Not having one is just suicide. So are my friends, and I made a plan. If we bully him into giving up, he'd give up on being a hero. But he never did and still hasn't, Izumi sobbed. How bad was the bullying? Naomasa asked, narrowing his eyes at her. Izumi winces and covers her face with her hands. She stayed silent, not answering the question. Izumi, he said threateningly, I suggest you cooperate, he said, scarily serious. Izumi sniffled and nodded her head, but not removing her hands. We hit him. Hiccup hurt him with our quirks. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. Naomasa looked at her in anger and bewildered at what she just said. She and her friends bullied him for 9 years because he wanted to be a hero. Naomasa has heard a lot of outrageous reasoning, whether it be from conspiracy or stupidity. But this is ludicrous. So let me get this straight. Instead of talking to him like a normal person, you and your friends decided to bully him every day for simply wanting to be a hero without a quirk? Naomasa asked. His voice still sounded professional, but there was a lot of anger in it that the 3 Yagis could identify. Izumi lowered her head and nodded. Naomasa sighed and gripped the bridge of his nose. He felt like a school teacher trying to teach a 2nd grader how subtraction works. Naomasa looked at the girl who was still sobbing and clutching her knees to her chest. Does Izuku have any friends? Naomasa asked. Izumi shook her head and cried harder. We were his only friends. But when we started bullying him, the other kids joined in. They would call him Deku like we do and often joined in to hit him. No one wanted to be friends with him and risk of us hating them as well, she cried. Naomasa huffed and shook his head, doing the best he can to hold his anger. Naomasa then looked over to Toshinori, who looked destroyed. He understands, but Naomasa wasn't about to comfort him. He deserves every feeling that he currently has. Toshinori caught Naomasa's gaze and met it. Naomasa then gestured to Izumi and had a silent conversation with the man. Toshinori's eyes widened before looking down in shame. He nodded his head. Naomasa sighs and shakes his head disappointedly. So Toshi, please tell me why Izumi knows about One for All and why Izuku probably doesn't, despite him being a much better candidate from what I've heard? Naomasa asked with a tired tone, completely over everything he's heard today. He needs a holiday after all of this is done. I only told Izumi today. I offered her my quirk, but she said Izuku was a better fit. I agreed, but he hasn't come home for me to tell him, Toshinori said sadly. Naomasa glazed at the man. If Izumi had said yes, would you have told Izuku about you being All Might? Naomasa says angrily. His professionalism slips. Toshinori doesn't meet Naomasa's heated stare. I don't think I would have even thought about it, Toshinori admits. Naomasa sneers at this, his quirk telling him that he told the truth. Naomasa stood up abruptly, shocking the three Yagis. He stares at the three with an unimpressed look. Before we discuss the punishment for you three and your friends Izumi, I would like to see Izuku's room, he said. His tone left no room for argument. Not like any of them would anyway. Inko nodded her head and stood up. She led the detective down the hall before gesturing to the door. Naomasa didn't even look at her before opening it. Immediately upon entering it, Naomasa is overwhelmed by the smell. It was overbearing with disinfectant, bleach, and medicine. It fills the entire room. Naomasa coughs and covers his nose with his arm. The three Yagis look horrified while Naomasa enters. This room doesn't look that bad in condition, but it was probably from Izuku cleaning it. The room was incredibly barren. A dirty mattress and sheets that have bloodstains on them, with a small desk that looks like it'll break, and second with a closet that seems normal on first glance. Naomasa growled and walked over to it. He swung the door open and scowled, ignoring the fact that Izuku has three clothes hanging at the top, with one of them being a uniform that looks badly burned. At the bottom of the closet was three shorts, with one of them being burned. But what Naomasa was more focused about was the bleach, disinfectant, Bane cream, gauge tape, and several other medical supplies sitting next to the shorts. Naomasa frowned as he spotted something else hidden at the back. He reached forward and grabbed it and pulled it back out. It was a pill bottle. Naomasa scanned over the label of the bottle. They were painkillers, powerful ones as well. You can only be administered these in a hospital. The Yagis, who were still at the door, too afraid to take a step in Izuku's room, gasped when they saw what Naomasa was holding. Is that? Inko asked shakily. Naomasa sighed and pocketed the pill bottles. It's painkillers. Powerful painkillers. You can only get these at hospitals, as you can't be prescribed these at a pharmacy. Which means that you Izumi beat Izuku so badly that he had to resort to finding someone with these, Naomasa said, now glaring at Izumi. Well, these were the only ones he could find. You better hope it is the latter, he said menacingly. Izumi gulped and looked away. Naomasa closed the closet door. He then spotted something tucked away to the side of it. Naomasa raised an eyebrow and leaned over to see what it was. Naomasa paled. Slowly he bent down and grabbed the item. He looked back at the family with rage as he showed them what he was holding. He was holding a small office rubbish bin. The contents in it smelled vile, as they were bloody bandages. A lot of them. They were almost all a deep crimson, and the worst part is that they don't look that old. It's highly likely that there's been several more bloody bandages. The Yagis all become deeply disturbed and horrified at what they were looking at. The amount of blood here can equal a normal murder scene. By the looks of it, they look recent, so there have been loads of these bloody bandages. Naomasa yelled angrily. The Yagis all jumped back by his voice. He looked furious. Izumi, what are the names of your friends now? I want you to call them and bring them over here, Naomasa demanded. The Bakugos and Totodorokis, she stammered, absolutely terrified. Naomasa then looked up to her parents. Great, you call them over. I'll call Nezu and have him deal with you, Naomasa said angrily. Naomasa then stormed off and grabbing his phone. He dialed the sadistic rat. Probably the first time in his life was he actually happy to see Nezu. He was about to press the green call button, when Toshinori suddenly spoke. "Wait, what are we going to do about Izuku?" Toshinori asked. Naomasa turned to him with an unreadable expression. "We'll put up a missing child's case. You'll have to talk about this with Torino and Recovery Girl, because you can't hide this. His quirk won't be mentioned, as there will bias because of his quirklessness status. I will do everything in my power to find him, but whether if he wants to come back home to you three is up to him," Naomasa said before turning away and called Nezu. Izumi was in tears. Silently, she walked to her room. What was her future going to be like? It's dead at night, but the detective doesn't seem to care, so her friends are going to be brought over to discuss their punishments for hurting Izuku. She just wants this entire nightmare to be over and have her brother back. She wants to hug him like a sister would and play together like normal sisters would. She wants to see him smile and geek out about her and her friends again. She wants what they had before they got their quirks back. She wants to be a family again. Naomasa sighs as the phone hangs up. Nezu was on his way with Recovery Girl and Gran Torino to annihilate the Yagi's and Izumi's friends. He never thought he would actually be excited to see something like this. But before Naomasa could think about it any longer, he got a call. Curiously, he looked at the caller's ID. It was Chief Tsuragami. Naomasa groans, but picks up the phone nonetheless. "Hello, Chief. Sorry, but I'm preoccupied with one of my friend's child going missing," Naomasa said, intending to make the conversation short. "Apologies to Kochi, but you will be needed to lead this next case," Tsuragami stated. Naomasa was confused. "What, why?" Naomasa asked. He heard Tsuragami grunt on the other line and grab something. "Well, we found two thugs tied together in an alleyway. Apparently, they had tried to rob a kid with dark hair, but that's as much as they could see on the dark. But the kid had taken them out," Tsuragami told. Naomasa was still confused. "Okay, but why am I specifically needed on this case?" Naomasa asked. "Well, one of the men has a mutant quirk that makes his bone metal, something that can't be removed. Except when we arrested him, his bones weren't metal. He didn't have a quirk at all. Neither did the other man," Tsuragami stated in a low voice. Naomasa's eyes widened. A man with a mutant quirk no longer has his quirk. But that's not possible. The only way that can happen was, well, he was dead. All Might, Toshinori killed him. But he was the only man that could erase a mutant quirk. But the person who did this was a kid. Tsuragami just said so. But that leaves only one option. All for One has a child, Naomasa muttered. So, this was the end of part 1 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.